it'll stay with you. All right, on to Galatians chapter 5. And we ended last week in the middle of a discussion on flesh versus the Spirit. And the first list that we looked at the end of Galatians chapter 5, I guess the middle really, is a list of the works of the flesh. And it's just a good reminder to sometimes go over these things and then look at our life and say, are there any of these things that are in my life? Are there any of these sins that I need to remove from my life? Any of these things that I'm tempted to do that I need to guard myself against? These are the things that we're working to control and to crucify. But if we only remove these things, then it's really not enough. Because when you remove something from your life, something else takes its place. So what's going to take the place of any of these things that we do? And so God gives us a list of those things next. Now it's important to mention, Michael has done a whole series on this, so we probably know it, but these are not our fruits, right? These are the fruit of the Spirit. These are not fruits that we by ourselves can produce, but they're the fruits that God produces in us. So separated from God, we do not produce any of these things. We may read self-help books and listen to podcasts, and we may work on some of these specific things, but that's really not the fruit of God being produced in us. David Shannon used an example like this. Imagine if you saw me in the foyer and you saw me cutting out orange construction paper, and you said, hey, what are you doing? You getting ready for VBS or a kids class? And I said, no, I'm hungry. I'm making an orange. You'd be like, oh, good one. I'm like, no, I'm serious. I'm hungry. I'm going to produce an orange. And you would say, well, that's ridiculous. An orange can only be produced by the source that it comes from an orange tree. You can't just make an orange. And so it is for us with the fruit of the Spirit. We can't just make these things in our life. They can only be produced as we're connected to God, who's the source of these things. So let's get into those, and we'll finish the list of those today. So verses 22 through 23, the fruit of the Spirit. Now we looked at love. A good summary of that is 1 Corinthians 13. We looked at joy. Someone just remind us, what's the difference between joy and happiness?
External circumstances versus internal conditions.
Okay, so Michael said happiness is about what's going on around us. Joy is about what's going on inside of us. If I have a flat tire on the way home, I'm not going to be very happy about that. But my joy won't be shaken because that's just a small thing in the grand scheme of life. So even if something bad happens to us, a death, we're fired, a divorce, loneliness, any of these things, that can affect our happiness, of course. But it should not, if we're having the fruit of the Spirit produced in us, really affect our joy. Because our joy is not set on what's going on around us right now, but about the future, about the big picture. All right, so love, joy, and then peace. And we talked about how we need to be at peace with ourselves. A lot of people get married, and they are not yet at peace with themselves. And then they have a marriage that's unhappy. Well, why? Because they weren't who they needed to be yet. So we have to have a peace with ourselves. We need a peace with each other, and then a peace with God. All right, and then for some new stuff, let's finish the rest of the list. So patience and long-suffering. This is just the idea that we all have to wait. If you're in traffic, you have no choice about that, and you have to wait. What you do have a choice about is how you wait. Well, what if you are in a stage of life that you wish was different? What if you wish you could have kids, but you can't? What if you wish you were married, but you're not, et cetera, et cetera? What if you wish your job was different? Well, we all have to wait for those kind of things from time to time. But the question is, how do you act when you wait? And that's the idea of patience and long-suffering. You got no choice about waiting for little things day to day and big things in your life. But how do you act when you wait? That's the idea of patience and long-suffering. You try to handle that yourself, I don't know that it can be done. But you plug into the Word of God and let Him produce His fruit in your life, then you can wait much better. All right, kindness or gentleness. This is a loving gentleness that is shared with others. It's being approachable. Yes, Marvin.
Backing up to patience, I know with me that's one of my struggles. I struggle hard with it. But as I'm sitting here thinking about it, that one patience, it affects everything. It affects my joy, it affects my peace, it affects whether or not I'm kind to others, goodness in my heart. I mean, it affects everything about my life. So I know that's probably the thing I need to work on most, and I think that sometimes we just kind of think, like you were just saying, that, okay, it's how we act in the moment, but it's actually how we feel. You know, we gotta work on it and know that, okay, mood would upset me. So I started thinking about it a couple of days before, and it wasn't nowhere near as bad.
Oh, smart.
as it happened.
Mhm. That's a great idea and good point. Very good. I sometimes will tell my kids I want them to do what I've told them, and I want them to have the right attitude as they do it. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to, is not just get through the commands like, oh, but to get through them in the right way. And it definitely is a struggle. Well said. All right, for kindness, it's the idea of doing good for others. You know, one thing that's unique about Jesus' teaching, he says if someone mistreats you, turn the other cheek. But it doesn't stop there. In other places, he tells us to go and do good things for them. So what a countercultural idea that is. Not just let God take vengeance and make things right later, but also serve them in the moment. And that's what kindness is about. We could remove all the works of the flesh from our life, and then we might say, well, so this coffee cup doesn't do any of those things either, so this coffee cup's a Christian. No, that's ridiculous. Just removing those things from your life is not enough, but we have to add things. And one of those things is what we do for other people, the kindness that we have. All right, goodness. Goodness is just a life that excels. If someone cooks a meal for you and you say, man, that was good, or someone hits a shot in basketball and we say, good shot. What made it good? Well, it did what it was designed to do. It went in. What makes our life good? When we do what it's designed to do. What's the whole of life? To fear God, keep His commandments, to love the Lord our God with all that we have, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So what does goodness look like? Well, meeting our purpose. Just like a shot's good if it goes in, our life is good if it meets the purposes that God has given us. So goodness. Faithfulness. All right, think about this. Are you faithful to your spouse? Well, that's a pretty easy question, right? Well, are you faithful to your God? And that might be a little harder. And this example falls short in some ways, but it's a good idea just to get us to examine our faithfulness. Faithfulness is unwavering allegiance. It's not perfection, which is where this example falls short, but it's commitment, and it's staying true to God. We might be tempted to be unfaithful to God, to cheat on God, as it were, to be worldly a little bit, to do part of what we want to do. And so are we faithful to God all the time, or are we not? All right, gentleness and meekness. This is strength under control. I will sometimes play board games with my kids. I'll sometimes play sports with my kids. I could dominate them, I promise you. And sometimes I do, just to let them know who's the man, let them know who's in charge, right? But I don't go all out on everything we play all the time, because that would be ridiculous. Imagine me playing with a 6-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old in basketball and trying my hardest, throwing elbows, boxing out. That's ridiculous. But gentleness and meekness is that strength, but it's under control. A lot of times you have like a stereotypical male who somebody calls them yellow or threatens their manhood, or in a fight, let's fight or something like that. They feel like they have to step up and prove that they are a bigger man or that they could win a fight. Really, that's weakness. That's like a child who just lets people push their buttons and push them around. They're not in control of the situation, the other person is. Strength and, like we see here, meekness and gentleness is that strength under control. Yeah, I could probably wear this guy out, but I'm not going to do that. I'm in control of the situation, and I don't fight. Nobody pushes my buttons in that way. So it's strength, but it's under control. Think about Jesus. He was called meek and lowly, right? And Moses was the meekest man alive in his day. So the two great lawgivers were defined by meekness. So we should be too. And that just means that they were strong, but they had it under control. All right, and then finally on this list, self-control or temperance. This is a similar idea to patience, I guess, in the way we might look at it, but it's being able to control yourself. It's a personal discipline that puts you and puts God in charge of everything. Your mind, your body, your reactions. I think oftentimes we go into the community and maybe we're studying the Bible with someone and we ask them to control themselves. Whatever sin you deal with, whatever false teaching maybe you've believed, get that in check and control yourselves. But as Christians, do we control ourselves? What are the areas in which we need some control? Do you spend way too much time on your hobbies? Do you have an unhealthy lifestyle? It would be wrong of us to ask the community, control yourself. And then there are areas in our life where we don't control ourselves at all. And so we need to make sure that God is in control of us and we don't just live a life of reaction all the time. All right. It was kind of painstaking to go through a list like that in like 2 minutes. There's so much there. How could you do it justice? You can't. But we have to move on, and we just wanted to look at this in context. But if you would like some more information about the fruit of the Spirit, I taught a quarter on this one time, and so I have a lot more information on these, some lessons I could share and some notes, and you can ask me for those, and I can give them to you if you want the long version. All right, look at verse 24. So we're in Galatians chapter 5. Look at verse 24. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh along with its passions and desires. Paul said something similar in Romans 8, verse 5. He said, those who live according to the flesh set their mind on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their mind on the things of the Spirit. So when we became Christians, there was a death that happened, obviously. And we know we always think about our death, right? As we're baptized, we reenact the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. But there was another death that happened as well, and Paul talks more about this at the end of Galatians 6. But the world was crucified. So as we're being put to death and rising to walk in a newness of life, we're a new creation, we've been transformed, we also, as it were, put the world on a cross and crucified it so that sin was dead to us. So the world should not have the same appeal that it had. And so as we're thinking through things in life, where do we go? Do we go to the world or do we go to the Word? And this is harder than it sounds, and maybe we're not even doing as good a job at it as we think. So here are a couple tests for you just to think about. Now, when's the last time you went without a meal? When's the last time you went without reading Scripture? Now, which of those would we say is most important? Well, we would say Scripture is most important, but what does our life show? What do we hunger and thirst after? All right, another test. What's your favorite book series? Maybe your favorite author, maybe even a favorite band that you have. Have you read all their books? I mean, have you read every Harry Potter, for example? Or what about music? Have you listened to all their albums? But then think about the Bible. Have you read the whole Bible? It's going to be hard for us to say we believe the whole thing if we haven't read the whole thing. And so this crucifixion, our death, burial, and resurrection, part of it was to kill the old man of sin. We no longer live for ourselves. We hunger and thirst after the ways of God. So we have to evaluate ourselves from time to time and make sure that we do. All right, verses 25 through 26, and this will finish the chapter. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. So if we live in step with the Spirit, His fruit is produced in us. Remember, it's not our fruit. It's as silly to say I can be full of love, joy, peace, patience, etc. on my own, just by working on it, unplugged from the Word and from His people, as it would be for me to try to make an orange to eat out of construction paper. We have to be plugged into the Bible to let the Spirit work through us. But if we live in step with the Spirit, His fruit is produced in us. If we live with the flesh, we'll become conceited. We'll think it's all about us. We'll provoke each other and we'll envy each other. So let me ask you this, get some feedback on this question. What are some ways that we could become conceited with each other? What are some ways that we could provoke each other? What are some ways that we at church, as Christians, could envy each other? And this may be something that you've been tempted with yourself. And if that's the case, there's no shame in that. None of us are perfect. Or it may just be something that you can think of. But what are some ways that we could see this happen here at Oak Hill? That we could envy each other, be conceited, provoke each other in a negative way? We love each other so much we can't even think of a way. Couldn't even conceive it. All right. One that Michael said is one I was going to mention. Don't compare yourself to other people. That would be an easy way to get conceited. I think Oak Hill is special in that if Michael called on the way to church this morning and said, I got in a wreck, I don't feel good, whatever, we have like 10 guys that could probably be ready to preach. And we may have 15 to 20 that could be ready with a little bit more time. A lot of congregations are not like that. If the preacher's gone, they have to bring in a guest speaker. And so we're very fortunate. We have a lot of men who know the Bible and are willing and able to prepare a lesson. Now, each of us that like to preach and are able to teach Bible class, what if we said, man, when I teach, I put so much time in it and I just don't get any feedback. But every time brother so-and-so preaches, it's just praise lavished on him left and right. Well, that would be a temptation to say, well, what about me? Where's my respect? Why don't people appreciate me? And so we could become conceited. We might be involved in personal evangelism, which is personal. We all should be. But maybe we try really hard. We just can't get studies, or we can't close them. People aren't becoming Christians. But we see other people. Man, Braden was baptized yesterday. 2 weeks ago, this person was baptized, and they studied with Steve. Why are they a better evangelist than me? It's not fair. And we might become conceited. So we might compare ourselves to other people and say, why do they get opportunities to teach? Why do they get praise? And we might, instead of rejoicing with those that rejoice, we might provoke each other. We might be conceited. We might have that root of bitterness. All right? Can you think of anything else? What's a way that we could provoke each other? We could become conceited. Some problems could be brought up in the church through this type of attitude. What are some ways that we could become conceited with each other? We could envy each other. We could provoke each other in a negative way. Yeah, we used to have multiple adult classes, right? I think Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, and we haven't been doing that since COVID. But what if one person teaches in the family room and 2 people show up, and somebody teaches in here and there's 50? How does that feel to the person that had 2? Well, if your mind is right, that's probably going to bother you a little bit no matter what. But how you act with that, what you do with that, is important. You can't say, well, it's not fair. They have a bigger audience than me, but we would be tempted to. Ashley also mentioned just personal things. Man, that person drives a better car. They're doing better. Maybe they're married. I'm not. Why? That doesn't seem fair. And so we could look around and look at each other and say, well, what they have, I want, and I don't have it. It's not fair. We serve the same God. And so get upset about that. And so there are a lot of ways that we could have problems. We could create problems where there should be none. And Michael mentioned a good verse in 1 Corinthians that talks about not thinking more than you should of yourself. And we may read that in a minute. But too many churches look that way. Too many churches have infighting. Yeah. That's right, yeah. Yep. And we often say, some of us that talk about some spiritual things together, is if you're having a bad time or you're struggling with a sin, is it's really hard to be upset with someone, be conceited, deal with these problems if you're staying in the Word, if you're praying, if you're serving other people. I don't know that it's impossible, but it might be close to impossible. So if you see these things start to spring up in you, read the Bible, pray, talk to other people about it, and get some prayers on your behalf, and that helps a lot. So staying in step with the Spirit. So too many churches look that way, have problems, infighting. Well, I want to sing newer songs. Well, I want to sing older songs. Well, I want to study this Bible. Well, I want to do a topical study. Well, I want to do exegesis of the Scripture. And all these different things that we might be opinionated about, and we get upset with each other about it. Too many churches look that way. Well, what should church look like? Well, Galatians chapter 6 is going to show us what church should look like and how we should treat each other. Look at verses 1 and 2. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So as Michael said, the church should not be filled with the things at the end of chapter 5. Envy, conceit, provoking each other. But here's what the church should look like. The church should be filled with people who help each other. It's important to say this. Maybe we don't say it enough, but you can't do everything alone. No one can. The good news about that is, though, that you were not designed to do everything on your own. When Adam was alone, God saw it and said it's not good, and he gave him a helpmeet, and he gave him a wife. Even Jesus was wise enough before he went into his temptation in the wilderness to be associated with John the Baptist and the Holy Spirit, and immediately after he's associated with the angels and calls it the first disciples. Our culture says you can do it alone. It praises individualism and isolation. But Christianity goes in stark contrast to those things and says you can't do it alone. No one can, and you weren't made to. We need each other. We can't keep Christians at a distance or as just acquaintances because we need each other. And honestly, this can't be stressed enough. If you want to see people just once a week, or maybe twice, then you can do that, but that's not enough. If you want to never have Christians to your home or never go to their home or never go out to eat with them outside of services, you can do that, but that is not enough. If you want to keep your struggles to yourself, then you can do that, but that's not enough. If you see sin in another Christian's life and you want to just stay in your lane and mind your own business, you can do that, but that's not enough. The church is not the church if it's not together. The church is not the church if its members don't know each other in a transparent way on an intimate level. We need to kill our spirit of independence and our tendency to isolate. Proverbs 18:1 says this, "A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire and rages against all wisdom." A person who isolates themselves seeks their own desire and they rage against all wisdom. That's what God says about the idea, well, I'll just do it alone or I'll just keep to myself. That's not Christianity. There are two problems we face with this idea of being alone. Number one is I can do it on my own. No, you can't. The second one is I have problems of my own and I don't have time for other people. Yes, you do. Bearing the burdens of others. What does it say here in Galatians 6:2? It fulfills the law of Christ. If you say, well, I'm too busy to let other people in my life, then that's true. You are too busy. Anytime we're too busy to do something that fulfills the law of Christ, we're too busy. We have to be in each other's lives. We have to know each other. Bearing the burdens of others fulfills the law of Christ. I can't. I'm too busy. What? Then yes, you're too busy. Too busy being the key words. All right, somebody give me some ways that we can help each other if we actually know each other and what each other is struggling with that we could not do if we keep each other at a distance. So, for example, maybe in other words, give me some ways that we can help each other if we're actually talking about spiritual things often and we actually know each other. We know each other's family. We know each other's situation versus if we only know someone at the level that says on Sunday morning, hey, how you doing? Fine. How about you? Good. See you next Sunday. How can we help somebody in the first situation where we cannot in the second? All right, if you don't get to know anybody and you don't take more than 7 seconds on the Sunday morning, there's zero chance that you'll be able to pray with them. Very good. What else? All right, so you're not going to open up to somebody you do not know. Will not happen. You're not going to go up to, and honestly, the person at church that you don't know more than 7 seconds every Sunday, it has not earned the right for you to actually answer the question, how are you? When someone says, how are you? How are we doing? Sometimes we're doing great. Sometimes we're not doing great. We don't want to necessarily pour that on everyone that asks us the question, but do you answer, how are you, honestly, to anyone? And that's the point. You can't do that if you don't know someone. All right, what else? All right, if a stranger says, get sin out of your life, hopefully we're mature enough to see if they're telling the truth. We can be objective. But most often we're going to say, well, you don't know me. Who are you? You're not invested in my life. But if our best friend at church, one of the elders, the preacher, that we love and respect and have been in the trenches of spiritual warfare with, comes up and says that to us, man, that's going to stop us in our tracks. I hope it will. And so if we don't know each other, that's not going to mean much. We could probably go to another church in this city or down the road that nobody knows us, and we could start fresh and just worship the right way, but still keep sin in our life. If we wanted to, we could do that, but not if we know and love each other. And so we have to really have that relationship in order to be able to call people out, hold people accountable, rebuke them effectively. All right, anything else that's on someone's mind? A way that we can help each other if we actually know each other that we could not if we keep each other at a distance. All right, it's so important to get involved. So important to get involved. Any of you ever done weightlifting? You ever done the bench press? Now, if you go to Planet Fitness, they have machines, and so you don't need a spotter. But those of us that lifted weights before they had gadgets like that, that makes me sound old. I don't care. It's true. You remember weight class in high school or middle school or something? You're trying to put up a bunch of weight, and you're not sure if you can make it, or you're trying to push through a max out. It's not a good time in the middle of maxing out to look for your spotter to try to find them. You need them looking in your eyes so that they can know if you've got it or you don't. The same thing is spiritually true for us. We need to be close enough to each other that we can see each other, look each other in the eyes, and know if we need help with the burden that we're carrying. It's not a good time when you're struggling to have to go find somebody. You already need people in your life. Very true. What we do outside the building does more for building relationship than any time of just sitting here can ever do. And so, I think it's pretty clear that we need each other. We can't do this alone, and we weren't designed to, and we have to make time for other people. We will be better Christians. Our lives will be easier. Our struggle will be lighter if we're together more often, and we spend time together, and we help each other. The Roman soldiers, you remember that they could command the locals to carry something for them. Now, there were limits on that. They couldn't say, hey, carry this from one city to the next if it's 50 miles away, but they could compel them to go 1 mile. Here, carry my pack for a mile. And so I think that's part of the reason Jesus said if someone compels you to go a mile with them, go 2. Okay, because that's an actual physical, easy to understand example. But the same is true for us. We can help each other do the same thing. We can take the burden that someone has, and we can carry it for them for a while as we walk down the road. We don't have to carry everything on our own. So for some homework, and I won't be teaching next week, so I don't guess I can check up with you. I may call each of you, but for some homework, what I would like you to think about doing is pick 2 Christians that you don't know very well, that are at this congregation, that are in Bible class right now, and try over the next few weeks to get to know them a little bit better. With phones and technology, that's going to be a very easy thing to start. You can just text them throughout the week. Imagine if you just pick somebody that you respect already but maybe don't know that well, and you start texting them maybe every other day or maybe every Monday or something like that and say, hey, I'm going to pray for you today. What can I pray for you about? Or here's something I read in my daily devotional that I thought might help and encourage you. Call them. Maybe try to plan some time where, hey, I'm going to invite them to church to lunch with me after church next Sunday. And if they can't make it next Sunday, that's fine. I'll try to maybe do it before Wednesday Bible class next week. And get to know somebody else and just see if knowing a Christian on a more intimate level will help your life be better and your struggles be easier or not. And what you'll find is, as Michael always says, God's way works, and your life will go to a different level of Christianity that you didn't even know was possible. So Paul says that kind of thing fulfills the law of Christ itself. So in Greek, this word restore, Rod used the word rebuke, the idea of you're here and you need to be here. The Greek word restore is the same idea as the medical term for resetting a bone. So a bone's been broken and you restore it. You put it back into a working way so that it can heal. And the same is to be done spiritually. Then it says this isn't a task for someone that's rude or hateful. Some people almost love to see sin in someone else's life so they can write a blog about it or so that they can condemn them from the pulpit. Those kind of people really have no business restoring the erring, because it says it needs to be done in a spirit of gentleness and in a way that reflects on your own sin and your own temptations. Romans 12:3 says, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Self-esteem, God's self-esteem is not thinking too much of ourselves or too low. God doesn't make junk. We are his handiwork, his favorite thing that he created, if you will. But we also shouldn't think too much of ourselves. We're just people and we're imperfect. And Jesus was the only one that was perfect. So God's self-esteem is that perfect view of ourself. So this isn't a task for someone that's rude or hateful or overly critical or harsh, but it's to be done gently as we consider our own ability to be tempted. All right, verses 3 through 5. Galatians 6, 3 through 5. For if anyone thinks he is something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not his neighbor, for each will have to bear his own load. These verses seem like they maybe say the opposite. Some of the Proverbs are that way, right? Don't answer a fool according to his folly, or you'll look like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll become conceited and everybody will maybe think he's right. So back-to-back verses in Proverbs that say the exact opposite. Well, which one do you do? Well, each situation calls for different things, and so wisdom is being able to take God's truths and apply the right one at the right time. And so it is here. The general rule is that we are responsible for each other's lives, and we are responsible for helping each other and responsible for asking for help and not trying to be so proud that we try to do it on our own. But it's also true that at the end of the day, the responsibility to live like Christ and where we will spend eternity rests only on our shoulders. We will not get to the judgment day and someone be able to speak for us. Our parents' faith won't work. It doesn't matter how sound and loving the elders are. What did we do? And so we have to have help, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for the outcome in our life. What a shame if we could have made it to heaven if we would have asked for help. But we don't, because we didn't. And so wisdom is going to be using the right one of these in the right way. All right, and then look at verses 6 through 10. And let's just look at verse 6 first. Let the one who is taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. Let the one who is taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. Now, I could go off on a tangent on this. I'm going to try not to do that for sake of time, but no promises. There's not a lot of time that we get to talk about this subject. So since it came up naturally in the verse, it might be a good time to talk about it. But think about this. What do we owe our teachers? Our Bible class teachers, our preachers, the person that converted us. This past summer, for the first time, I met Frank and Sue Ford in Chattanooga. And Frank and Sue Ford is a couple that was instrumental in converting my dad and in converting Ashley's grandmother. So my children, as they look up their spiritual family tree, can trace their roots right back to one couple on my side and on my wife's side. Now, what do I owe that couple? I mean, how could I ever repay them for what they've done for me? There's no way. There's no way that I could ever repay them for that. Now imagine this. What if they fall on hard times? They're older. What if they fall on hard times later in life? Maybe they have an illness that takes all of their savings. Maybe they literally have to choose between having a place to live and living. Now, what should I do about that? If they have family, I'm sure their family will take care of it and the government might help. But if any of those things are absent or fall short, do I have a responsibility to those people? I tell you what I'll do. I will move them in with me if they will come and have no other place to go. Or if they want or need to stay where they are, I will sell a house. I will sell a car so that they can have one, or so that they can have rent money. And if I can't do it, which could be possible, you know what I would do? I would ask for your help financially with them. My family is going to take care of them as long as I have breath in my lungs. Well, how do you feel about the person that taught you the truth? How can you repay them? Well, you can't fully, but you can always make sure that they're taken care of. 1 Corinthians 9 has basically the whole chapter is a discussion on this idea of taking care of those that teach the truth. It's a more complete discussion on it. But verse 7 says, "Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk?" The answer to those is none. No one goes to war without the government paying for it. A soldier is not required to pay for his transportation to the battlefield. If someone ministers to us and they dedicate their whole lives to us, we don't have to make them rich, but they better not worry about money. I know preachers' wives who are coupon experts, who add water to soup every time they make it, and who plan meals months in advance because that's the only way that they can do it. They don't have enough money to do anything else. I know preachers, families that have to save for years to go on a vacation while their members go on several every year. Now think about what that means. I think that's a shameful thing. You know, you can be a Christian without being a minister or without being a teacher. And a lot of the best ones are. But whose 9-to-5 work is more important? The minister, the teacher, the disciple, the mentor, those that lead among us? I think as Paul is saying this really, it's an unhealthy church that asks a minister to do spiritual things that they would not do and to do it for nothing. And so he sums it up this way: let the one who's taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. So just something for us to keep in mind to make sure we always take care of our ministers and we take care of those who have been instrumental in helping us to become Christians. That's what God would have us to do. All right, look at verses 7 through 8. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For what one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap life eternal. So this is really the question: where do you go when a problem comes up? Do you go to the advice of the world? Do you go to your wants and needs, your emotions? Or do you go to the advice of the Word? If you go to the world, what you'll do is you'll add to your problems. If you go to the Word, what you'll do is you'll help them. And you can reap life eternal. All right, and then verses 9 through 10. Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. And then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially those who are of the household of faith. Do you ever get tired of people? Do you ever get tired of helping people? Do you ever get tired of doing good? Do you ever feel like giving up in those moments? I do. I'm sure some of you feel that way as well, especially if you've been burned when you've selflessly helped someone and it's come back to make your life harder. Some people test my patience. Sometimes it's people in the world, which is to be expected. Sometimes it's my brethren. I'm sure I test some people's patience as well. Michael, have you ever had your feelings hurt by a church member? All right, he's going to be thinking a while. We'll just assume it's yes. Have you ever considered, and this one you don't have to answer, but I think we would know the answer. We don't want to put him on the spot, but have you ever considered leaving ministry? All right. So the idea is, do we ever get tempted to give up? Sometimes we do get tempted to give up. I've been there recently. What is God's solution to that when we feel like giving up? And this speaks to what Michael Ramsey said a few minutes ago. Here's the solution. You've helped people and you're tired of people and you feel like giving up and you want to quit. What's the solution to that? All right, verse 10. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So when you feel like giving up, God's solution to that is take yourself out of the equation, help other people anyway. Typically what you find is you get out of yourself, you get into the Word, you pray, and you serve other people, is that a lot of your problems, maybe they don't disappear, but they become more bearable. And so God's solution for wanting to give up, it's not give up, it's not even take a break, but it's to continue to help people anyway. When we feel like giving up, the answer is always to take ourselves out of the equation and to serve other people. And you know, this is one of those times it's helpful to bear each other's burdens. When you feel like giving up, don't keep that to yourself, because you're not alone, and all of us have been there and understand what that feels like. So find that Christian that you formed a close relationship with and tell them about it. Confess that and ask for prayers and for help, and you'll feel better. I promise it will work, and so does God. All right, and then verses 12 through 18, and this will be the end of our study of Galatians. Paul is going to end it with a summary of why he wrote Galatians. So verse 12, it is those who want to make a good showing in the flesh who would force you to be circumcised, and only in order that they may not be persecuted for the cause of Christ. For even those who are circumcised do not themselves keep the law, but they desire to have you circumcised that they may boast in your flesh. Look what I was able to get them to do. Keep the old law as well. Verse 14, but far be it from me to boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. Here's what it boils down to. We don't need Jesus plus anything. We don't even need Jesus plus anybody's approval. We need just Jesus. And as Christians, that's what we're trying to appeal to. Don't be a part of a denomination. Don't teach anything plus Jesus. Teach just Jesus and everything that he taught. By which the world has been crucified to me. Here's the idea of when we were on the cross in our baptism, the world was also put on the cross and crucified. And I to the world, verse 15, for neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. Well, how did we become a new creation? Well, we were baptized and the old man of sin died. Verse 16, and as for all who walk by this rule, Remember, some are going to say there is no law to follow. Galatians is a discussion on faith and belief versus obedience, but we know that's not true. It's a discussion on the old law versus the new law. And Paul reminds us of that when he talks about rules here in verse 16. And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God. Who is the promised people of God now? Who are the seed of Abraham? Who are the children of Israel? Well, we are. We're the new children of Israel. And so Paul ends with this summary, and he says, really the whole crux of the matter is Jesus and his new law, not the old law. Don't add Jesus plus anything, just Jesus. And so that's how Paul ends with a summary of why he wrote the book. We got maybe just a few seconds. Anybody have any comments or questions before we dismiss?